A beginner's guide to buying a guitar amplifier. I've been asked to do a video on this by Rebecca on Instagram, funnily enough, and a guide to buying an amp. Now, if you want to sound like somebody like Brian May, you're going to have to buy 3 Vox modded AC30s at over £1,000 a piece, buy a Greg Fryer treble booster, a Fox phaser, a chorus pedal, possibly soundproof your entire house unless you have understanding neighbours, and probably have an interesting chat with the bank manager to accumulate all of how to sound like Brian May, all the gear that you would need, and that's without spending £3,000 on the actual Red Special guitar. And if you look at any guitarist, you know, even if go back to the 60s, you look at what Jimi Hendrix was using, it's quite a big setup. And if you're living in a house, you're not going to want to use massive Marshall amps. If you look at Slash's setup, I remember I had a friend who was into Slash, and he had like a Marshall stack in his living room, and he literally, the dial was on 0 and it didn't even get a 1. It was like slightly past 0, and you had to have it facing the wall because it was just too loud for household use. And then when it goes into effects, if you look at a rig like what the Edge off U2 uses, that's going to set you back quite a bit of money. And if you're a beginner, or you're going to want to spend, you know, if you're struggling to how to play a G or a D chord now to change, are you really going to spend that kind of money on amps? So what to buy? There's a lot of inverted snobbery in the guitar world, with people who want, you know, guitars made out of handcrafted Brazilian walnut, you know, carved by Buddhist monks, but with their feet, you know, from a mountain, you know, to give it a better tone than just simple block of maple or whatever. And it is quite interesting. And then, especially with dealing with how to sound like Brian May, there's a lot of people who, you know, think the BMGs made by Brian May's company aren't very good. You need to buy a proper one because this, that, and the other is right. And when you're a beginner, you can listen to all that and think you've got to spend an absolute fortune. The same can be said with amps. So what was interesting is if you watched Brian May's micro lessons on Instagram. Now, if you consider Brian May multi-millionaire, rock star, can afford anything he wants, you know, no amount of money is an object when it comes to buying it. Now, what did he use when he was recording in lockdown? Stuff like Keep Yourself Alive, We Are the Champions. A little Vox practice amp with built-in effects. And essentially, if you're a beginner and you're in for household use, that is really all you need. And there's a whole range of companies, Line 6, Vox, Orange, Marshall, Boss, produce amplifiers that are around about £120, roughly. I'm not sure what that is in dollars, possibly $200, that have amp simulators which have different types of distortions which will create the sound of different types of guitar amps. And that's kind of what you want when you're a beginner. You don't need anything massive. If you look at the amp I'm using there, I'm using the Vox BMG. If I want it to sound louder, sometimes go through the line out and go through my hi-fi amp, and it gives us a louder sound. Sometimes when I'm making videos, I can use that. For household use, I used to have a big Line 6, I think it was a 750 watt, and really it was just too loud. Unless you're going to start playing live, then you're going to want something bigger, and then you're going to be spending more money. Like I say, there's inverted snobbery, but people who don't like amp simulation, they like, I like the sound of a Marshall. So sometimes when you want to pick a type of amp, look at, say, who you're trying to replicate, what type of amp did they use. So sometimes you don't necessarily need amp simulation. If you just want, if you want it to sound like AC/DC, buy a small Marshall amp, overdriven, and you might not necessarily need lots of different types of distortion. If you want to be more rounded, and versatile and have different sounds. You get like line 6 ones that have like an overdrive, they'll have like a rock setting, a metal setting, an insane setting, so that you have a range of different types of distortions. And that's kind of all you need for household use. Don't fall into the trap of when you see these, especially like Fender, Squier, Stratocaster beginner packs, which have a small Fender amplifier, which has an overdrive button and no effect on it whatsoever. It's very limited. It basically does nothing more than amplify the guitar, and you're not going to sound like Van Halen or Brian May using one of them. So a lot of people have a struggle trying to create the sounds that they want, but sometimes it's because they're using the wrong gear, or they have the right gear and they're using it wrong. So look up information on Google on how to create different sounds. For practice and for home use, sometimes you don't even have to buy an amplifier. If you've got an iPad, if you remember recently, there's software Amplitube. It's a free download. Obviously you can buy stuff to add on to it, that's how they make the money, but the initial thing's free. I did a video on how to link your guitar to an iPad or an iPhone with a similar little device that doesn't have to be that expensive. I think you can buy the iRig adapters on eBay. The older ones are about £5, and you can, I think for it was about £20, you could buy the Brian May Amplitube set for iPad. Obviously if you want it for the MacBook, it was more involved, more expensive, but for simple portability, iPad, iPhone, it replicated virtually everything Brian May uses. Again, inverted snobbery, it sounds nothing like Brian May. I don't think that there's not, but it's £20, and for what the price it was brilliant. Considering, no, it isn't going to sound like 3 modded AC30s with a treble booster in a live setting. It isn't going to be able to do it, but it's not what it's for. If you're a beginner, it'll give you everything you need. There's a demo a friend did of that using a Squier Stratocaster, using that software, and got some really good results. Replicated the sound pretty good, considering it was home use. But like I say, many artists, I think it was like Joe Satriani used to use, I think it was, oh, come on, it was I'll put the picture on after I've made the video. He used to, like, backstage, he'd practice and he'd have an effects unit. I've got a Zoom 4040 effects unit. I don't use an amp with it. I go through the line out through my hi-fi amp, and sometimes if I want different sounds with chorus or flanger or whatever, I just use that, and don't necessarily, because I'm in the house, don't necessarily feel the need to use a guitar amplifier. You can't whack the sound of a true, tube-driven guitar amp, but maybe for recording or a live setting you would use that. But in the house, it's only you listening. Are you that finicky or fussy about having the true, real sound and authentic sound? Probably not. So take a leaf out of Brian May's book. In lockdown, he was using a very small £120 practice amp with built-in effects to create the sounds that he wanted. And everybody in the comments was, oh, how do you create this sound? How do you create that sound? It sounds brilliant and it's amazing. And it was very simply a little practice Vox amp. So I hope that helps. I haven't recommended any different types because there's so many different types of amps. As you progress and you want a bigger amp because you want to play live, look at a bigger amp. But the best way to find out what type of amp to buy is sometimes dependent on what artist you are looking at. Look at what they use, and that will give you your answer. Sometimes if you go to guitar shops, they want to make money, so obviously they're going to suggest the more expensive option, which just because they're trying to make money. So you're caught in that. It's a bit like going to buy a car. The car salesman wants to sell you the most expensive car there, even though your budget might not be able to afford it and you might not need one. But shop sensibly, and you don't have to pay an arm and a leg to get the sound that you want. So I hope that helps, and this one's for Rebecca on Instagram.